I'm going to put down a grid, and this grid is going to be my cards. I'm going to set it to the size of a typical business card, which is 85 times 55 millimeters, or 0.085 and 0.055 meters. I want to give them some basic UVs for later, so I'm just going to put down a UV quick shade note, and we got some UVs. And we got the UV attributes on the points. I think I'm just going to hide the UVs for now. I want to give this grid a little bit of a thickness, so I'm going to put down a poly extrude. Let's say just a millimeter, so the distance would be 0.001 meter. And then I'm going to toggle output back, so we get the back as well. I want to make it a little bit bigger, because I think it's going to work better for the simulation. So I'm going to put down a transform node. Making it bigger will cause the card to move a bit slower when you simulate it, which is what I want. But if you don't want it to move slower, you can scale the gravity up by this value as well. And then I also want to move it up, so I'm just going to put down another transform node for that. And I'm just going to do it in the scene view, press enter, move it a bit up, rotate it. Then I want to give the card some angular velocity, so I'm going to put down in attribute VOP. And I'm going to put down a constant, and it's a vector. And I want it to spin around Y. So I'm just going to give it some value in Y, like 10. And then to write it out, I'm going to put down a bind export. And again, this would be a vector. And it's called W. And you can see it here in the geometry spreadsheet. Then I want to prep it for the rigid body simulation. So I'm going to put down a RBT configure. And I'm going to connect the card to the first and the third input. So that's the render geo and the proxy geo. You can see that we are transferring the attributes. We don't have any velocity, but we do have angular velocity, so that's good. And then this node gives it all these properties that you can see in here in the proxy geometry section of the geometry spreadsheet. So you can see it actually inherited the angular velocity. So we are ready for the solver. So I'm going to put down a RBT bullet solver. And again, I'm going to connect the first output and the third output and move a blue flag. Let's play. It's going to fall. Yeah, because we need a ground. So in collision, I'm going to go to ground type, ground plane. And so it doesn't go too fast, I'm going to toggle a real-time playback. So now we can get a better idea how it actually looks. So if you want to work on the motion, you can change how you position the card in the beginning. And you could change its angular velocity. You could even give it some velocity. Then you can adjust the bounce or the friction, or even the density of the card and see if it gives you something interesting. But I'm more or less happy with this, so I'm just going to put down a camera. Let's see, somewhere like here. New cam, and we got the cam here. I'm going to lock the view, find a place for it. I'm going to go back inside the system and I want to write this out to disk, but first I'm going to shorten the frame range. So take the timeline down to, let's say, 100. And then to write it out, I'm going to put down a ROP geometry output. I'm going to call it card sim. And then I'm going to render the full frame range. And I want to add a folder for my file. So I'm going to copy this and just put a slash and paste this again. So we have the name of the file and the name of the node. Save to disk and then read it back in. And we got a new folder, geo, and in here we got the card. Yeah. If you check the info card, you'll notice the card is packed. So I'm going to unpack it. And we got some attributes, so I'm just gonna get rid of them. I'm gonna put down an attribute delete. And I'm gonna choose delete non-selected. And the ones I wanna keep is P and then the UVs. You can see the UVs here, and you can also see them in the scene view. I'm gonna calculate the velocity, so I'm gonna put down a trail node. I'm gonna set it to compute velocity, and I'm gonna choose to evaluate the velocity within the frame range, so we don't get an error on the first frame since we're doing a backward difference. And now you can see we have some velocities, and you can see them in the geometry spreadsheet as well. And now let's render the card. I'm gonna first put down a null. I'm just gonna call it render card to reference in the render object. So upstairs, I'm gonna put down another geometry object. And this is gonna be my render object. So I'm going to call it render card and dive inside and put down an object merge. And I'm gonna pick up this null here. So I'm gonna go outside of this node, up one level into Geo1, and then I call the null render card. And it's here. I'm gonna hide other objects. And then I'm just gonna hide all of these. I also want a ground plane to render, so I'm gonna put down another geometry object. This one I'm gonna call render ground. Dive inside, and I'm just gonna put down a grid. I'm just gonna create some lights up here, so I'm gonna put down a skylight that will give us 2 nodes, sunlight and a skylight. I'm gonna take the sunlight to 0 just so I can adjust the skylight. It's gonna be the shadowy parts of the render, so I'm just gonna take this one a little bit down, something like this. Then I wanna adjust the sunlight, so I'm gonna take it back to 1. I think it's a bit too much, so let's try half. Something like this. The sunlight node references a lot of parameters from the skylight, for example, the angular size. So I want these shadows to be a little less sharp, so I'm just gonna take this angular size up. And then I wanna use the scene view to position the sun, but this node is referencing the skylight, these parameters here. I'm just gonna break the connection, so I'm gonna say delete channels, because I just wanna set it manually myself. And I'm gonna go into look through light and sunlight. And now I'm gonna lock the view. I'm gonna see where my camera is at. So we can find some place for it somewhere. And now that I found a good location for my light, I'm just gonna unlock the view and save the file and go into Solaris. I'm gonna put down a scene import node to import everything from object level. And in force objects, I'm gonna hold down Control and choose the camera, the render card, the render ground, and both the lights. And the shaft pattern, gonna set it to the camera view and the camera render view. Then I'm gonna hide the light geometry and hide the grid as well. We seem to be getting some depth of field, so I'm just gonna put down a karma setup, connect it and move the blue flag. I want to choose my camera, and then in camera effect, I'm gonna disable the depth of field. Then I'm gonna put down a material library. And I want to put this photo on the front of the card. So inside of the material library, I'm gonna put down 3 principal shaders. So one for the front of the card, one for the rest of the card, and then one for the ground. I'm gonna give the front of the card a different color from the rest of the cards. And then I'm going to assign the material. So upstairs, I'm going to put down a assign material. And I want to assign 3 materials. And the first of it would be the front of the card. But if you look in the geometry spreadsheet, we just have one card for the whole thing. So what I want to do is I want to split this object up into 2 meshes. So one would be the front of the card and the other one would be the rest of the card. And I can do that with a name attribute on the primitives of the card. So I'm going to go back to object level and then inside the system. And I want to isolate the front from the back. So I'm going to go upstairs to the poly extrude node. And I'm going to toggle front group and back group. And now if you check the info card of this node, you can see that you have in total 198 primitives. And 81 of them are in the extrude back and another 81 are in the extrude front. I'm gonna save the simulation out to disk again. I'm just gonna overwrite my old cache. And in the file node, I'm gonna reload geometry. And you can see we still have the 2 groups. And down here, I'm just gonna put down a blast. And I know I want this to be the front of the card. So let's try to say delete non-selected and extrude front. That is actually the back. So I'm gonna take the extrude back. And then I wanna give the primitives of this node an attribute. So I'm gonna put down an attribute wrangle. And I want to run it over primitives. And then I want to create a string attribute. So I'm going to write s at name is equal to, and let's call it card front. And we got the string attribute here, name is card front. And then I want to give the rest of the geometry another name. So I'm going to put down another blast. And I'm gonna choose extrude back again, but in this case I'm not gonna toggle delete non-selected. Then I'm gonna put down an attribute wrangle. And I'm gonna have it run over primitives, and it's a string attribute. It's called name, and I wanna set it to, let's call it just card. So now we have this attribute here, it's called card. I'm gonna merge the 2 together and then plug it into the output. And now we got both card front and card. So back in Solaris, we now got a render card, and inside of render card we have card and card front. So in the assign material node, I can choose. So if I write slash render card, and then I can choose card front. Can assign the material. It's inside of the material library that I just created. It's called card front. Okay. So we got the front. Then for the back, again slash render card, and then just card. And to that one, I'm just gonna assign the card material. You can see that we have different materials in the front and in the back. And then finally just the ground. And it's just going to be the ground material. This one. And then back in the material library, I'm just going to take this to white again. And then I'm going to take the reflection down a bit. Let's say something. Let's say 0.2. And in textures, I want to use texture. And then I'm going to get my picture. And this picture, I made sure it's the same dimension as the card. So 85 times 55 millimeters. I had put it next to my HIP file, so it's here. And we got the picture. Then for the rest of the card, I'm going to make it white as well. And then I'm going to take the reflection down as well to the same 0.2. For the ground, I think I wanted to emit some light, so I'm going to change its color to white. so we get a bit of light from it, but I'm going to take the emission intensity down. So let's say maybe 0.3. I'm going to make it a little bit metallic. And then I'm going to decrease the roughness. So maybe we can get some reflection going. And let's try something low, 0.05. And you can see some reflection. And instead of having the emission white, we can give it a little bit of color. Right now we don't have any motion blur. So I'm going to put down a geometry render setting node. And I want to apply the motion blur to the card. So I'm going to write /render cards. Inside of motion blur, I'm going to set velocity blur to set or create and velocity blur. I want to tone it down a bit because I want to see the card. I'm going to pin the view inside of Solaris. Then I'm going to go back to object level. And inside of the geometry network, I'm just going to scale down the velocities down here. So these vectors, I'm going to put down an attribute wrangle. And I'm going to keep this as run over points. And then to scale down v, I'm going to write vector v attribute at, and then the attribute is also called v. And I want to multiply it by something lower, maybe let's say 0.2. So I'm going to say times equal 0.2. And you can see in a minute that this number will go down. Yeah. And we also got less motion blur in the render. Back inside of Solaris, I'm going to go to the Karma Render settings node. And I'm going to create a folder for my render. So copy paste this, slash and paste. And then I'm going to change the name of the node. So the files will be named like that. And before I hit render, I'm just going to go on object level. And I'm going to make a flipbook. So in here, with the card and the ground, I'm going to right click the flipbook. I'm already inside the camera. And inside of size, I'm going to untoggle these two and start. So I added these two nulls that I animated to get a little bit of camera motion. So something like this. And then inside of Solaris, I will need to update the camera as well. So inside of the camera render setting, you can see we got a warning. Camera is missing because its name has been changed. Also in the material library, I'm going to change the color of the ground to white. Yeah, something like this. And you can see how the card is lying a little bit above the ground. So I'm just going to do a quick fix for that. So back in the system, I'm just going to animate it with a transform here. So I'm going to put down a transform. And then I want to see the ground as well. So I'm just going to only display the ground. And then inside of here, I'm going to say show all objects. So we see the ground as well. And as it falls down here, let's see. And in here, if I just move it a little bit down, something like this, it's lying on the ground. But if I go to the beginning, it's going to be penetrating the ground. So I'm just going to keyframe this value. So let's say on frame 28, I wanted to fully have this value. So I'm going to right click and say set keyframe. And then maybe around frame 18, I want to set another keyframe. So keyframe, set keyframe. And at this point, I want it to be at 0. So just as it falls at the transition, so it's not really noticeable. Other things I changed is that I gave the simulation some substeps. I set it to have 5 substeps. And then I also took down the density of the card. So it used to be 1000, but I took it to 100 just to make it a little lighter. So yeah, we are more or less ready. Let's see if it's still floating in the render. No, I feel like it's lying on the ground now. And then I'm just gonna save the scene. I want to render the full frame range and render to the disk.